Have you ever wondered why your life has not changed even though you have been trying? So let's deep dive a little bit on this. So have you ever wondered why two people can read the same books, maybe you and your friends, listen to the same motivational speakers, repeat the same affirmations, attend similar courses, pray for the same kind of life, and yet few years later one person's life has completely transformed while the others feels exactly where they started. So it's a question that has fascinated me for years, and maybe it's a question you have quietly asked yourself too. You work hard, you try to stay positive, you visualize, you hope, you pray, you tell yourself that this year will be different, but somehow life keeps giving you more of what you already have. Different day, same worries, different month, same struggles, different year, same story. If you have ever felt that way, I want you to know something. This video is not about teaching you another manifestation technique. It's not about giving you 10 affirmations or another morning routine or maybe another law of attraction hack. Because honestly, I don't think that's the real problem. I think the real problem is much simpler. And because it is so simple, most people completely miss it. So before we go any further, I want you to do something unusual. Don't think about your biggest dream. Don't think about the money you want or the relationship you are hoping for. Instead, think about how you have been feeling lately. Not occasionally, consistently. What has been the emotional atmosphere of your life? Has it been peace, pressure, gratitude, frustration, hope, or fear, or maybe quite confidence or constant worry? Because here is something that completely changed the way I understand life. Most people believe they create their future through what they want. But what if your future is actually influenced far more by what you repeatedly become? Let me explain it little more in detail. Imagine two gardens. Now both have the same soil, the same sunlight, the same rain. But one gardener plants roses and the other plants weeds. So months later, would you expect both gardens to look the same? Of course not, because a garden always grows what is planted repeatedly. Now, similarly, think about your inner world. Every thought you repeat, every emotion you rehearse, every belief you strengthen is like planting another seed. Day after day, week after week, year after year. And eventually, those seeds become your emotional landscape. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Your mind starts believing that landscape is simply who you are. For example, I'm just an anxious person. I'm just unlucky. Or maybe I'm just not confident. I'm just bad with money. But what if those are not your true identity? What if they are simply habits you have practiced for so long that they now feel permanent? So imagine listening to the same song every morning for 5 years. Eventually, what happens? You would know every word without trying. Not because you were born knowing the song, but because you repeated it enough that taught your mind what to expect. So, your emotional life works the same way. Whatever you repeatedly experience becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar begins to feel normal, even if it does not make you happy. That's why some people become strangely comfortable with stress. There are some few more who become comfortable with disappointment. Okay, this is what actually happens to me. And some become comfortable with chaos, overwhelming. Not because they enjoy it, but because their nervous system has learned to recognize it as familiar. And the human mind loves what is familiar. even when familiar is painful, because you want to be in the known territory. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever driven home and suddenly realized you don't even remember the journey? You stopped at traffic lights, you changed gears, you turned corners, you avoided other cars, yet your mind was somewhere else. How did that happen? Because your brain had switched into autopilot. Now, what is this autopilot? So, imagine this. What if you are not only driving your car on autopilot? What if you are also living your life on autopilot? The same reactions, the same emotional patterns, the same conversations, and the same fears, and the same expectations, without ever stopping to ask, is this really the life I want to keep creating? I believe this is one of the greatest hidden challenges of modern life. We don't consciously choose many of the emotions we carry. We inherit them, we repeat them, we reinforce them, until they quietly become our default setting. But here is the beautiful news. All is not lost. So anything that has been learned can be relearned, and anything that has been repeated can be replaced. And that brings me to something I would love you to try. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, but right now. I call it the 60-second state shift. For the next minute, I don't want you to think about your problems. Instead, I want you to become curious. Take one slow breath in. Hold it gently. Now, breathe out a little more slowly than you breathed in. Once again, take a slow breath in. Hold it gently. Breathe out a little more slowly than you breathed in. Notice your shoulders. Have they been tense all day? Relax them. Notice your jaw. Unclench it consciously. Now ask yourself one simple question. If I already trusted that life was working in my favor, how would I feel in this moment? Don't force an answer. Just notice what changes. Maybe nothing dramatic happens. Maybe you simply feel a little lighter, maybe a little calmer, a little more hopeful. But that's enough, seriously, because transformation rarely begins with giant breakthroughs. It begins with tiny shifts repeated consistently. Now, here is something very fascinating. Think about the people who make you feel peaceful. So, have you ever noticed that they don't always say extraordinary things? Sometimes they barely speak, yet after spending time with them, you somehow start feeling better. These are the people who walk into a room carrying stress. This is another set. Within minutes, everyone feels tense, nothing has been explained, no speech has been given, yet the emotional atmosphere changes. Why? Because human beings are constantly influencing one another in ways words cannot fully explain. We all carry energy. We communicate through our body language, we communicate through our facial expressions, we communicate through how we are carrying ourselves, with the tone of our voice, the attention we give, our presence, and the emotional state we carry. In other words, we are knowingly or unknowingly constantly broadcasting something. The question is, what have you been broadcasting lately? Not what you have been saying, but what you have been living inside. Because there is often a difference. You can say, I believe everything will work out, while spending every day expecting the worst. You can say, I trust life, while constantly living in fear, and you don't want to spell it out for anybody else, but you feel it inside and you feel small about it, you feel threatened by it. You can say, I deserve abundance, while secretly believing you never had enough. And when those inner messages don't match, you feel exhausted. Not because you are failing, but because you are pulling yourself in opposite directions. The first step is not trying harder. The first step is becoming honest. Honest about what you have repeatedly practicing inside yourself, seemingly unaware that you are yourself doing a damage. You just take pleasure, or maybe you take comfort in the fact that nobody else is listening. But remember, you are your greatest enemy. So whatever goes inside you is actively being picked by your subconscious mind. So because awareness is where every transformation begins, so that's why we have to start practicing saying the right thing to ourselves. And in the next part of this journey, I'm going to show you, that is the next part means next section, I'm going to show you why your attention is one of the most powerful forces shaping your experience, why chasing often pushes your dreams further away, and how one simple daily practice can begin changing the emotional signal you carry into every area of your life. So now let's go to the second section that I promised. I hope if you are there with me till now, you have reached this second section. Mind you, you are ready, your mind is ready to transform. That's why you have been able to reach this section. Majority of the people would stop short and probably stop the video halfway through the first section. So once you have reached it, kudos to you, the universe has your back. So let's deep dive little further. Imagine you are standing in front of a mirror. You smile and the mirror smiles back. You raise your hand and the mirror does exactly the same. Now imagine standing in front of that mirror and becoming angry because it isn't smiling first. Doesn't it sound ridiculous? Doesn't it? Yet many of us unknowingly do something very similar with life. We wait for life to become kinder because we want to become peaceful after the life has become kind to us. We wait for success before we become confident. Successful you will become, only then you will gain confidence. So you want to achieve, you want to see that outcome manifest in your life, and then you want to change your inner environment, your inner thought about yourself. We wait for love before we open our hearts. We wait for abundance before we begin feeling grateful. In other words, we expect the mirror to change first and then our life to follow. But what if life has been waiting for you? It is actually the other way around. So it's being a different inner state. Now I know this idea can be misunderstood. I'm not saying that simply thinking positive thoughts will magically solve your problem. Life does not work that way. You still have to take action, you still have to learn, grow, work, heal, have difficult conversation, and sometimes face uncomfortable truths or uncomfortable circumstances or uncomfortable situations. But here is something I have noticed. Two people can take exactly the same action yet create completely different results. Let's understand it better. One person walks into a job interviewing believing that I hope they don't reject me. The other walks in thinking, I wonder how I can genuinely serve this company. Same interview, different energy. One is trying to avoid loss, the other is ready to create value. Can you feel the difference? One is contracting, the other is expanding. And people respond to that. Life responds to that. Because before people hear your words, they often experience your presence. Think about the last time someone genuinely listened to you. Not waiting for their turn to speak, not checking their phone, just fully present and having an eye-to-eye contact as though they have given you their full 100% attention. So how did that make you feel? You felt seen, valued, important. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you offered that same presence to your own life? So most of us rush through our days, always chasing the next goal, the next achievement, the next breakthrough, as if happiness is waiting somewhere in the future. And here is the strange thing. If your mind is always living tomorrow, you never truly arrive today. And today's moments quietly become your life. Okay, so have a break, take a deep breath. So now let me share something that transformed the way I begin each morning. Before I touch my phone, before I read a message, before I look at the emails, I ask myself one simple question. What kind of energy do I want to bring into today? Not what do I want to get today, not what problems might happen today, but what do I want to be today? Do I want to be calm, patient, creative, generous, courageous, because once I choose that, my decisions begin changing naturally. And that's something many people overlook. Your identity always leads to your behavior. Imagine someone who says, I want to become healthy. Wonderful. But imagine another person saying, I am becoming someone who takes care of my body. Now, did you hear the difference, the subtle difference between two statements? The first person is chasing an outcome. I want to become healthy. The second person is building an identity. I am becoming someone. So outcomes come and go. Identity stays with you. That's why lasting change almost always begins from the inside. Not because it is mystical, but because every decision flows from who you believe you are. If you believe is someone who never finishes what I start, your actions will quietly support that story. But if you believe I am someone who learns and grows every day, your actions begin supporting that story instead. Your life often follows your identity more than your intentions. So here is another exercise I would love you to try. I call it as identity mirror exercise. Take a notebook. Draw a line down the middle of the page. On the left side, write the person I have been. Be very honest, 100%. Maybe you have been impatient, fearful, or constantly worried about what others think. Or maybe you've been kind but neglected yourself. Now on the right side, write the person I am becoming. Don't write what you want to have. Write who you want to become in order to achieve what you want to have. Calm, confident, disciplined, compassionate, financially wise, healthy, joyful. Then ask yourself one question. What would this version of me do today? Not next year, not when everything improves. Today. Perhaps they would make one difficult phone call. Perhaps they would do a little bit of dieting. Perhaps they would avoid binge eating. Perhaps they would forgive someone. Perhaps they would go to the gym. Perhaps they would go for a walk instead of scrolling endlessly. Perhaps they would finally begin the project they have been postponing. So small actions may seem insignificant at present, but repeated consistently, they quietly become your new identity. Now here is something very fascinating. Every musician knows this. You don't become a pianist by performing on stage once. You become one by practicing daily. Every athlete knows this. Championships are won long before the competition begins. They are won in ordinary mornings, ordinary workouts, ordinary repetitions, but done consistently. Life works the same way. Extraordinary lives are usually built through ordinary moments repeated with intention. And maybe that's why real transformation often feels so unremarkable. There is no dramatic music, no fireworks, no overnight miracle, just one better decision followed by another and another, until one day you wake up and realize you are no longer the person you used to be. Now there is one more idea I want to leave you with before we continue. Most people spend their lives asking, how can I get more? More money, more recognition, more success, more love. But perhaps a better question is, what can I become that naturally creates those experiences? Because rivers don't struggle to flow. The sun doesn't struggle to shine and rise. A flower doesn't struggle to bloom. It simply becomes what it was designed to be. Maybe your life is not asking you to force more. Maybe it's inviting you to unfold more, to become more fully yourself, to let go of the old stories that no longer fit, to stop chasing the life you want and start becoming the person who naturally lives it. And because when your inner world begins changing, you know that how often your outer world quietly follows. And in the next part of this talk, I'll show you why the biggest obstacle is not fear. It isn't failure even, and it's not even lack of opportunity. It is something much more subtle, something almost all of us carry without realizing it. And once you see it, you will never look at your life the same way again. So let's go to the final part of this talk. Congratulations for being here, because only 1% of the people who saw this video would reach this point. So let me go to the final point. Now we have arrived at what I believe is the most important part of the entire conversation. Because if you have been listening carefully, you may have noticed something. None of this is really about attracting anything. It's about becoming someone. And those are two very different journeys. Most people spend years trying to change their circumstances. Very few spend time changing the relationship they have with themselves. And here is something I have learned. The relationship you have with yourself quietly becomes the blueprint for the relationship you have with your life. If you constantly criticize yourself, life begins to feel like a place where you are constantly being judged and criticized. If you don't believe you are enough, no amount of external success ever feels enough. You always feel that you are not worthy. It was not enough. If you don't trust yourself, every decision feels frightening. Everything begins inside, not because the world revolves around you, but because you experience the world through you. Now, imagine looking through a dusty window. You don't clean the landscape, you clean the glass. And suddenly the same view looks completely different. Perhaps that's what personal growth really is. Not becoming someone new, but removing everything that prevented you from seeing it clearly. Think back to when you were a child. There was a time when you laughed easily, when you dreamed without embarrassment, when you believed almost anything was possible. And life may have added disappointment, fear, failure, comparison, heartbreak as you grew. But underneath all that, your ability to hope never truly disappears. It simply became buried beneath old experiences. And maybe that's why you are watching this video today. Not because you need someone to give you power, but because you needed to remember that you have what you had all along. Now, I would like to leave you with one final practice. I call it the evening reset. Before you sleep tonight, don't reach for your phone. Instead, sit quietly for 5 minutes. Take a notebook and write the answer to these 4 questions. What gave me energy today? Not what made you productive. What genuinely made you feel alive? Maybe it was a conversation, a smile from a stranger, a quiet cup of tea, or a walk beneath the evening sky. The second question, what drained my energy today? Not to complain, simply to become aware, because awareness gives you choices. The third question, what kind of person did I become today? Did you become more patient, more grateful, more courageous, or did fear make some of your decisions? There is no guilt here, only learning, awareness. And finally, ask yourself this question, who do I choose to become tomorrow? Notice the wording, not what do I want tomorrow, but what do I choose, who do I choose to be? Because every sunrise gives you another opportunity to practice becoming that person. Not perfectly, but consistently. You see, people often ask, when will my life change? But perhaps the better question is, when will I stop waiting for life to change me? Because life has a fascinating way of responding when we begin responding differently to it. It doesn't do it immediately, it doesn't do dramatically, but does it steadily and quietly, almost like the sunrise. You don't see the earth spinning, yet morning always arrives. Growth often feels the same. Some days you will think nothing is happening. You will wonder whether your efforts matter. You will question whether you are making progress. Please don't let those moments fool you. A tree doesn't grow because someone stands beside it every day measuring it. It grows because it continues receiving nourishment. Your mind works in much the same way. Every encouraging thought, every act of self-respect, every healthy boundary, every decision to forgive, every moment you choose hope instead of hopelessness, you are quietly nourishing the person you are becoming. And one day, someone who hasn't seen you for a long time will say, there is something different about you. They won't be able to explain it. Maybe neither will you, but you will know. Because change rarely announces itself. It simply becomes visible, often enough invisible in invisible moments. Now, before we finish, I want you to pause for one last time. Take a slow, deep breath. Close your eyes if it feels comfortable. Another deep breath. Close your eyes. Keep your eyes closed. One more time. A slow, deep breath. And imagine meeting yourself exactly 1 year from today. Not the version who stayed the same, the version who kept growing, who kept choosing awareness over autopilot. peace over panic, purpose over fear, self-respect over self-doubt. The future version of you walks towards you with a smile. Not because life became perfect, but because they stopped waiting for perfection before living fully. Now imagine they place a hand on your shoulder, look you in the eyes and say just one sentence. Thank you for not giving up on me. Now take another slow breath and remember that feeling, because your future is not created in one extraordinary moment. It's created in thousands of ordinary moments, just like this one. One small decision, one act of courage. That's how lives change. Not through magic, not through luck, but through conscious living. So as you leave this video today, don't ask yourself, can I change my life? Instead ask, what is one small choice I can make today that my future self will thank me for? Start here, then do it again tomorrow and the next day, until one day you realize you didn't change just your circumstances, you change yourself. And when you change yourself, the way you experience the world changes too. So if this message spoke to your heart, I would love to hear from you. Comment below with these simple words. Today I choose who I become. Your words may inspire someone else who needs hope today. If this video helped you see yourself a little differently, please share it with someone you care about. You never know which conversation might become the turning point in another person's life. Thank you for spending these last few minutes with me. It meant a lot to me. I'm Mosam from Divine Gracia. So until we meet again, take care of your mind, protect your peace, choose your thoughts with kindness, live with intention, and never forget this. You are not here merely to go through life. You are here to grow through it. One conscious choice at a time. That's what it takes. Take care. Till the next time.